They told me I was dead to them. "You're not part of this family anymore," my mother hissed in front of everyone. "You won't get a cent." And for a moment, I believed her. I stood there, heart pounding, face burning with humiliation, ready to walk out of the room like the unwanted daughter I had been for years. But then, the lawyer cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, lifting a thick envelope from a leather briefcase, "her name is the only one in the will." The room froze. My father's smirk vanished. My sister's nails stopped clicking. You could hear the air being sucked out of the room. And in that silence, I didn't feel ungrateful. I felt seen. This is the story of how the people who cast me aside got exactly what they deserved. And how one man-me grandfather made sure the truth couldn't be buried with him. For as long as I can remember, I was the one who never fit the mold. I wasn't the golden child who made honor roll, or the charming one who knew exactly what to say at family dinners. I was the quiet one, the one who asked too many questions, the one who didn't smile for the camera when things weren't okay. When I turned down a job offer at my father's firm, and chose to work for a nonprofit that helped women get back on their feet after abusive marriages, my mother said I was wasting my education. When I moved into a tiny apartment downtown instead of staying in the family estate, my father asked if I was trying to embarrass them. And when I finally called out my brother for his drinking problem after he crashed my car, I became the ungrateful one. Every family photo has a missing piece, and that piece is me. They didn't say it aloud at first, they never had to. Their silence said everything. The empty chair at Christmas, the group texts I was no longer on, the vague excuses my parents gave to others about why Jessica's just busy these days. I made peace with it, or at least I thought I did. I built a quiet life, not perfect, but honest. I worked long hours at the shelter, came home to my rescue dog, and spent weekends painting old furniture I found at estate sales. I stopped trying to earn their love. I stopped showing up to be ignored. But when my grandfather passed, something inside me cracked. He had always been different. He didn't care about appearances. He cared about kindness. He'd visit me on Sundays just to bring me fresh peaches from the farmer's market. He once sat through an entire benefit gala at my nonprofit, even though he hated wearing ties. And yet, when he died, I wasn't told. I found out from a newspaper clipping someone emailed me, not from my parents, not from my siblings, but from a coworker who happened to read the obits. They buried him in a private ceremony and didn't even send me a text. I should have known then that they had cut me out completely. So when I got that email, a formal, coldly worded invitation to the will reading, I almost deleted it. At first, I thought it was a cruel prank, maybe one last jab from my sister, who once called me a bleeding heart disappointment. But something about the signature, the name of Grandpa's lawyer, made me pause. He wouldn't have sent this, unless it mattered. Unless he had left something unfinished. So I went. And I walked straight into a room full of people who had already decided I didn't belong. The law office was in a stone building, on the edge of downtown, one of those old colonial renovations, with gleaming windows and a door too heavy for its hinges. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before going in. Not because I was scared, no, not anymore, but because I needed to remember why I was doing this. Not for them. Not even for Grandpa's money, if there was any. I came because I needed answers. I needed to know if the man who once called me his little compass had really forgotten me in the end. I walked through the heavy door into a hush of mahogany and leather. The receptionist, a young man in a navy suit, looked up and smiled politely. "Jessica Monroe?" "Yes." "Conference room C, down the hall, second door on your left. They've already started arriving." Of course they had. As I approached the door, I heard familiar voices, polished, loud, and full of performative grief. My father was saying something about legacy. My mother's laugh floated through the hallway like brittle crystal, charming, rehearsed. My sister Brielle was complaining about the chairs. "Honestly, Daddy, couldn't Grandpa have hired someone who worked in interior design?" I paused, just for a moment. Not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to savor it that last breath before walking into the lion's den. When I stepped inside, every head turned. There was a beat of stunned silence, like I had crashed my own funeral. My mother's face tightened. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp, polite, just loud enough to wound. "You weren't invited," Brielle added, without even looking up from her phone. "I got an email," I said evenly, raising my chin. "From Mr. Langford's office." I nodded toward the tall, thin man at the end of the table, my grandfather's attorney. His expression was unreadable. "I told them to take your name off the list," my mother snapped. "You made your choice a long time ago." "I didn't know grief came with guest lists," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. My father stood. "Let's not make a scene. Jessica's presence is unfortunate, but she's here now. Let's get through this." "I agree," Mr. Langford said smoothly, finally standing. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "The reading will begin shortly, but before we proceed, there is a preliminary statement your grandfather asked me to read aloud." My mother's eyes narrowed. Brielle actually looked up. Even my father tensed. "Of course," my mother said. "Let's get this over with." But what came next wasn't what they expected. And it was definitely not what they had prepared for. The moment I sat down, I felt it, that familiar, cold weight of judgment. My mother didn't bother to hide her glare. My father clasped his hands together, exhaling like a man forced to tolerate a pest. Brielle gave me a once-over, from my modest blouse to my thrift store flats, and smirked. She leaned toward my mother and whispered something. They both chuckled. I didn't care what it was. I'd spent too many years giving those whispers oxygen. Mr. Langford cleared his throat, a small but commanding gesture. "If everyone is ready, I'll begin." But before he could speak, my mother stood up. "Actually," she said, her voice syrupy with false grace, "before we waste any more time, I think there's something that needs to be said." The lawyer hesitated. "Mrs. Monroe? This is—" She cut him off with a practiced smile. "I know my father-in-law meant well," she began, turning to the room like a stage actress. "But Jessica hasn't exactly been part of this family for quite some time." A few of the extended relatives shifted uncomfortably. Uncles, cousins, people who had once sent me Christmas cards. They were now silent spectators, watching a public execution dressed as a will reading. My mother went on. "She's made it clear that she has no respect for our values, our sacrifices. She ran away from everything this family built, and has chosen to remain estranged." "I didn't choose estrangement," I said quietly. "You chose silence." Her face hardened instantly. "You're not part of this family anymore." And then came the line I would never forget. "You won't get a cent." There it was, the truth laid bare like a slap across the face. I didn't move. I didn't cry. But something inside me, something fragile and old, cracked. Mr. Langford adjusted his tie slowly. "I think your father-in-law would disagree." My mother turned to him sharply. "Excuse me?" The lawyer opened the leather folio in front of him and pulled out a sealed envelope. He held it with both hands, then looked around the room. "Before we go further," he said, "I've been instructed to clarify one thing." His voice was calm, but with a weight that filled the space. He tapped the envelope gently. "Jessica Monroe is the sole beneficiary named in this document." The silence that followed was devastating. It was a vacuum, a rupture. Brielle's lips parted slightly, as if trying to process the words. My father blinked twice. My mother's knuckles went white against the back of the chair. And I, the ungrateful, the outcast, just sat there, saying nothing, because for once, the truth spoke for me. My mother's voice cut through the silence like a shard of glass. "This is a mistake," she said, her smile twitching at the corners. "There's no way my father-in-law would leave everything to her, not after everything she's done." Mr. Langford didn't even blink. He simply unfolded the document with the precision of a surgeon. "There is no mistake," he replied calmly. "Your father-in-law, Mr. William Monroe, executed this will, 6 weeks prior to his passing. It is legally binding and witnessed. My father finally spoke, his voice brittle with disbelief. He was sick near the end. Confused. We saw it. He thought the mailman was a World War II spy. That's funny, I said before I could stop myself. Because 2 months ago, he called me to help him set up his new smartphone and beat me in online chess twice. Langford nodded. In anticipation of such objections, Mr. Monroe scheduled a full psychiatric evaluation the same day he signed the will. He reached into his briefcase and slid a thin folder across the table. The assessment was conducted by Dr. Olivia Hart, chief neurologist at St. Augustine Medical Center. Her report is in this folder. No one moved. The room had turned to stone. Langford opened the file and read aloud. Mr. William Monroe is of sound mind and clear judgment. He exhibits no cognitive impairment, delusional behavior, or diminished capacity. He is fully aware of the implications of his decisions. He closed the folder and placed it neatly back in his briefcase. Any challenge to the will on the grounds of mental incompetence would be summarily dismissed. My mother sat down, slowly, as if gravity had changed. But this isn't fair, Brielle whispered. She left us. She didn't even come to his funeral. Because I wasn't told he died, I said, my voice cold now. I found out through a Google alert. While the rest of you were dressing in black for the cameras, I was lighting a candle alone. Langford straightened a second time. And one more thing. He pulled out a slim black USB drive and held it between his fingers. Your father-in-law recorded a video statement. It was notarized, witnessed, and prepared to be presented today. Brielle gasped. My father muttered, "Oh God." And my mother, for the first time, looked afraid. Langford didn't bother asking permission. He placed the USB into the laptop beside him and turned the screen to face the table. The screen came to life. My grandfather's face appeared older, more fragile than I remembered, but unmistakably clear-eyed. He sat in his favorite plaid shirt, in his old armchair by the window, the one that smelled like tobacco and peppermint. And then he began to speak. The image on the screen flickered once, then steadied. My grandfather in his plaid flannel shirt, glasses slightly crooked, hands folded, looked straight into the camera. He wasn't frail, he wasn't confused. He was sharp, calm, and deliberate. If you're watching this, he began, it means I'm gone. I won't waste time pretending we were a perfect family. We weren't. And I know this room is full of people who've spent more time polishing their reputations than their souls. A tremor passed through the room. My mother blinked rapidly. My father sat motionless, jaw clenched. I recorded this, Grandpa continued, because I knew there'd be arguments, because I know how this family works. Lies have become your currency, and appearance is your god. So let me offer the truth, for once unvarnished and final. He paused. Then his gaze seemed to pierce the camera. Let's begin with you, Charles. My father's name landed like a gavel. You built a successful real estate firm on the backs of working-class folks who didn't know any better. You sold them dreams, then pulled the rugs out from under their feet. The Bakers, the Mendozas, the Crawleys, I spoke to them all. I have affidavits, emails, transaction records. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but Grandpa kept going. You told them variable interest rates were temporary. You promised stability, but delivered foreclosures. And when I confronted you, you called them bad investments. Charles, they weren't investments. They were families. Brielle let out a breathy scoff. Grandpa didn't miss a beat. Ah, yes, Brielle. He leaned forward on screen, his tone now icier. Every charity gala, every designer dress, every social media post, all paid for with money funneled from my accounts. She jolted in her chair. What? I trusted you with access to help pay my bills. Instead, you used it to finance your brand deals and Botox treatments. My financial advisor noticed the inconsistencies. I didn't say anything at first. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. But then you forged my signature to wire $25,000 for a branding retreat in Tulum. My mother finally found her voice. This isn't the time or place for this, she snapped. Grandpa ignored her completely. And then there's you, Margaret. My mother froze mid-breath. You've lied to everyone, but mostly to yourself. For years, you ran this family like a country club, pruning out the unfit, including your own daughter. Jessica wasn't ungrateful, she was honest. She had principles, and that terrified you. She opened her mouth again, but no words came out. You cut her out because she didn't worship your illusion of perfection, because she dared to call out the rot beneath the polish. My vision blurred, my throat tightened. He looked directly into the camera again. And this time, I knew the words were meant for me. Jessica, sweetheart, he said, and his voice softened for the first time. You were the only one who ever visited without asking for anything. You brought me books. You asked how I was sleeping. You made tea the way your grandma used to. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. I saw what they did to you. I saw how they erased you. And I was ashamed not of you, but of my silence. That silence ends here. He sat back in the chair. He looked tired, but resolute. My legacy was never meant to be passed to cowards in tailored suits or hollow hearts in designer heels. My legacy belongs with the one person who still believes in truth, even when it hurts. He inhaled deeply. I leave everything to Jessica Monroe, not because she begged, not because she fought for it, but because she didn't, because she walked away with her integrity intact. And then came the final blow. To the rest of you, you will receive nothing. He let that sink in. But I've left something else, a file full of names, statements, recordings. Try to challenge this will, and it all goes public. Brielle gasped audibly. My father muttered something under his breath. My mother was sheet white, gripping her pearl necklace so hard I thought it might snap. Grandpa ended the video with one last look, this time with a sadness too deep for words. I hope someday you realize the value of what you've lost. Goodbye. The screen went black. No music. No fade out. Just the silence of a room suddenly stripped of every illusion it ever clung to. No one spoke for a long time after the screen went black. Even the air felt heavier, like we were all sitting beneath a collapsing ceiling of secrets. Mr. Langford let the silence breathe before he stood and reached for a thick manila envelope sealed in red wax. He held it up for everyone to see. This, he said, is the official, final will and testament of Mr. William Monroe. He broke the seal with a deliberate crack. As he began reading the legal formalities, full name, date of execution, witnesses present, my mother shifted in her seat. Her eyes had lost their usual sharpness. Now they just looked hollow. Then came the distributions. To my son, Charles Monroe, Langford read, his tone professionally flat. I leave the framed newspaper clipping of the first house he sold, the only sale he ever made without deception. My father stared straight ahead. No reaction, no denial, just stillness. To my daughter-in-law, Margaret Monroe, I leave my late wife's etiquette book, with the chapter on humility bookmarked. A few cousins awkwardly cleared their throats. No one dared laugh. To my granddaughter, Brielle Monroe, I leave the collection of receipts from every charge she made on my personal account. May it remind her that grace cannot be bought. Brielle's mouth opened, then closed again. She looked like she'd been slapped. Mr. Langford continued down the list. Other relatives were named briefly: an old watch, a family photo, a single book, a handwritten letter, each gift quietly symbolic, carefully chosen, and entirely devoid of wealth. But then he paused. And finally, he said, lifting a separate sheet with a handwritten note attached. To my granddaughter Jessica Monroe, I leave everything else. A breath caught in my throat. Langford looked up from the paper. Everything else includes the primary residence on Willow Hill Drive, the family cabin in Vermont, all financial accounts, investment portfolios, and 100% of the shares in Monroe Holdings, LC. There were audible gasps now. Someone, I think one of my uncles, muttered, "Jesus Christ." But Langford wasn't done. Ms. Monroe is also the sole beneficiary of Mr. Monroe's life insurance policy and retirement funds, totaling approximately $6.2 million. The numbers didn't even register. I wasn't thinking about the money. I was thinking about the letter Grandpa had written me last Christmas, the one where he said, "Your compass always points true, even when the world spins like hell around you." My mother stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. This will was clearly coerced. We'll contest every word." Langford didn't flinch. "You are, of course, free to do so. But as Mr. Monroe stated in the video, any legal challenge will result in immediate release of certain files to the press, to law enforcement, and to regulatory agencies." She sat back down without a word. For the first time in my life, I realized something profound. I wasn't powerless. They couldn't silence me anymore. And they couldn't silence him, not even in death. Everyone stared at me now. Their expressions had shifted not just from rage or shock, but something colder, calculating, desperate. The girl they had labeled ungrateful was suddenly their only lifeline. My mother leaned forward first. Her voice had transformed into something almost sweet, brittle, but honeyed. "Jessica, darling, you know this isn't what Grandpa really wanted. He was confused, sick. We all loved him. We're a family." Family. She had said I wasn't one of them less than an hour ago. I looked around the room at the faces that had tried to erase me from my own bloodline. They weren't apologizing, they were angling, positioning, surviving. So I stood. And for the first time in my life, they all sat still. "You think I wanted this?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. "You think I came here today hoping to walk away with money?" "I came for closure. You handed me betrayal." My father started to speak, but I raised my hand and cut him off. "But I'm willing to give you something." A flicker of hope lit in their eyes. I saw Brielle actually sit up straighter. "But it won't be money," I continued. "It'll be a chance. One last chance." Mr. Langford leaned forward slightly, listening. I looked directly at my father. "You will go to the Mendozas. You'll look them in the eye and admit what you did. You'll offer to pay them back with your own funds, not mine." I turned to Brielle. "You'll call the brands you worked with using Grandpa's name. You'll tell them the truth, and step down, publicly." Then my eyes found my mother. "And you will go to the women's shelter I work with every week. You'll volunteer for 3 months. No interviews, no photo ops, no pearls." She opened her mouth to protest, but I raised my voice. "If you want to be in my life, if any of you want to be a part of this family again, you will face what you've done. Not with lawyers, not with excuses, with action." My hands were trembling slightly, but my voice remained steady. "You spent years building a house of mirrors and expecting me to be grateful for the distortion. You called me ungrateful because I wouldn't pretend." I took a breath. "This is your chance to prove Grandpa wrong, to show him that maybe, just maybe, you were worth more than the lies." Silence. Not one of them moved. My father's eyes darkened with rage. Brielle looked away. And my mother, for all her false elegance, seemed suddenly very, very small. "I thought so," I said softly. Mr. Langford gave a small nod. And just like that, the test was over. They had failed it not because they were incapable of change, but because they never intended to try. I didn't speak to them again after that day. They never reached out. No apology letters. No calls. Just silence, the same silence they once used as a weapon, now returned to them as consequence. And I didn't chase closure anymore. Instead, I moved into Grandpa's house on Willow Hill, the home with creaky stairs, sun-drenched windows, and the garden he always said I'd inherit if you promised not to kill the roses. I kept the promise. I hired women from the shelter to help me restore the place. We painted walls, planted herbs, reupholstered antique chairs. Laughter echoed through the halls for the first time in years, and not the hollow kind that came with forced smiles and fine wine. I turned the guest wing into a free transitional space for women leaving abusive homes. No rent, no judgment, just safety, just a beginning. The money Grandpa left me wasn't just an inheritance, It was a tool. A tool to build something real. Something that couldn't be erased with whispers or rewritten by shame. One evening, as I sat on the porch sipping tea, Mr. Langford visited. He handed me a sealed envelope, no return address, no handwriting I recognized. Inside was a single photo. Me and Grandpa, sitting on the back steps. He had his arm around me. I was 13. We were both laughing, unfiltered, unscripted. Taped to the back was a note, written in the lawyer's neat hand. He carried this in his wallet every day. I closed my eyes and let the wind pass through me. Not because I was sad, but because I felt full in a way I hadn't in years. I didn't win a battle. I didn't beat them. I simply chose not to become them. And in doing so, I inherited far more than land or money. I inherited peace. Real, unshakable peace.